The Galactic Concorde's envoy ship shimmered as it broke through Earth's atmosphere, descending with the grace of a predator who saw no threat in its prey. Humanity watched in awe, but the Concorde soldiers looked down with barely concealed amusement. Earth was quaint, its weapons outdated, its people slow to evolve. A young alien officer, sleek and blue-skinned, sneered as he tapped into his comms. "They still use combustion-based firearms," he said in his native tongue. "This should be entertaining." The Concorde had come to extend an invitation, though it was more a gesture than a necessity. Earth was the last uncontacted planet on the edge of the Orion Arm, a backwater with potential, they claimed, but no real threat. The Concorde's true purpose was anthropological curiosity, to see the primitives perform. Among them stood Lieutenant Ralvek, representing the Vortari, a race of precision-obsessed tacticians. He viewed Earth like one might a child's sandcastle, amusing, fragile, and destined to be forgotten. At a hastily organized global summit, military demonstrations were arranged. The United Nations had chosen to showcase the best of Earth's forces. Advanced drones flew in synchronized patterns, tanks fired with thunderous flair, and human generals rattled off statistics. The Concorde soldiers watched politely, but boredom settled in quickly. They'd seen smarter targeting algorithms etched into civilian transport ships. The show ended with a proposal, a friendly cross-species skill demonstration. The humans agreed. When the sniper teams were introduced, Ralvek barely contained his grin. He had studied Earth's history. The idea of soldiers lying prone for hours, firing manually adjusted projectiles, struck him as pathetic. He leaned over to his comrade, a beetle-like strategist from the Thrix hive, and said, "They use metal slugs. No guidance, no adaptive targeting. Just aim and hope." Sergeant Elias Mason stood a short distance away, arms crossed, expression unreadable behind a pair of darkened goggles. Tall, lean, with graying hair beneath his cap, he looked like he'd been carved from war itself. He said little, only nodding when introduced, letting the other team members handle the talk. A reporter asked what made his unit qualified. "We hit what we aim at," one of his snipers replied. "Even if it breathes, moves, or hides." The Concorde soldiers laughed. Ralvek stepped forward, unholstered a sleek plasma carbine, and fired a single beam into a 1-kilometer target. The beam struck dead center. "Our younglings practice on moving asteroids," he said. "Perhaps your snipers can show us what flintlocks can do." No one responded. Mason looked toward the field, a dusty range lined with various steel and ceramic targets. Some moved on rails, others remained still. The range extended up to 3 kilometers. Mason knelt, unslung his rifle, and lay flat. The weapon was long, matte black, its stock worn smooth by years of service. He adjusted his scope without comment. A timer started. Wind stirred gently across the plains. The other Concorde soldiers began murmuring, impatient, dismissive. Then came the shot. A sudden, sharp crack echoed across the field. Half a second later, a ceramic plate at 2 kilometers shattered into dust. Silence followed. Ralvek frowned. "Wind compensation?" "He didn't use sensors," someone whispered. Another sniper settled in, sighted a target through thick brush, and fired. The target, a half-size silhouette, spun violently as the bullet tore through its center. More silence. More shots. Human after human, each one calm, deliberate, striking impossible targets from impossible distances. And not a single guiding AI in sight. The laughter stopped. Ralvek watched, his smile dying slowly. What he'd witnessed wasn't luck. It was discipline. Intuition. Training born from chaos, not algorithm. He crossed his arms, unsettled by the sight of a sniper calculating variables with nothing more than his brain. "What are they aiming with?" the Thrix strategist asked, confused. "Not tech," Ralvek muttered. "Something older." Mason remained where he was, still on the ground, lining up another shot. This time at a target on the move, zigzagging erratically. The Concord soldiers activated their recorders, watching closely. Another crack. Another hit. Dead center. Ralvek said nothing. He simply stared at the humans, now strangely quiet themselves, not boastful, not celebrating. Just loading their rifles again. The demonstration ended with a final shot, a sniper team from Eastern Europe firing a round at a glass target shielded behind an angled plate. The bullet ricocheted once, twice, then shattered the target from behind. Applause never came. Only stunned disbelief. The UN general gave closing remarks, but no one was listening. Eyes were fixed on the snipers now packing up in silence. Ralvek approached Mason, who was standing with arms folded once more. You don't use neural targeting, auto-calibration, or beam assistance, the alien said carefully. So how did you do that? Mason looked at him for the first time. His voice was gravel and calm. I see the shot before I take it. That's not an answer. It is, Mason replied, turning to leave. You just don't understand it yet. Ralvek watched him walk away, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. Unease. For the first time in years, he realized he hadn't laughed once since the shooting began. Not even a smile. The Concorde had come expecting a show. Instead, they'd seen something they weren't prepared for. A quiet kind of precision. A human kind of death. And the echoes of the killshots still hung in the air. The next day brought a windless dawn. Pale light spilled across the high desert training range, casting long shadows behind motionless target. Mason stood alone, shoulders square, his rifle resting across his back. Behind him, the Concorde observers gathered with fewer jokes and quieter conversations. Ralvek arrived last, helmet tucked under his arm, his expression unreadable. Gone was the arrogant sneer. In its place sat a cautious curiosity, sharpened by the discomfort of doubt. The Concorde had requested another round of demonstrations. Mason hadn't blinked. He'd simply nodded and requested a further range, targets at 3, even 4 kilometers. When the Concorde officials hesitated, citing atmospheric distortion, Mason merely said, "It'll make it interesting." They agreed. A countdown echoed through speakers, marking the beginning of the challenge. Mason didn't move immediately. He lay prone in the dust, perfectly still. His rifle was different this time, longer, heavier, with a barrel sheathed in heat-dispersing alloy. Beside him, Corporal Juno Sato ran the spotter's scope, whispering wind speeds and minor adjustments. Crosswind picking up, quartering left, she murmured. I see it, Mason said softly. Ralvek watched them, struggling to understand. No HUDs. No eye-linked fire control. Just 2 humans and a rifle. He switched his vision spectrum, thermal, then ultraviolet. Still nothing artificial. They were guessing? A breath. A pause. The rifle kicked once. Ralvek followed the bullet's path via drone feed. It arced, dipped, disappeared into the haze, and then a target at 3.8 kilometers exploded in dust. Not luck. Not anymore. He swallowed, throat dry. Mason blinked slowly and chambered another round. Then came the others. Snipers from different nations took turns, each one bringing their own rhythm. One used an antiquated bolt-action rifle with hand-loaded round. Another had a suppressed .338 Lapua, whispering death across the valley. Each sniper moved with eerie precision, calculating thousands of variables in silence. And each shot hit. By the 6th shooter, the Concorde delegation had stopped taking note. Instead, they simply watched. Not as critics. As witnesses. Ralvek approached the firing line, expression neutral. This range exceeds our battlefield norms, he said carefully. Your soldiers continue to make successful strikes without targeting assistance. Are you using hidden tech? Mason didn't answer. Juno did. No. Just gravity, time, and training. Ralvek hesitated, then crouched beside them. I don't understand. This isn't efficient. It's not about efficiency, Mason said. It's about finality. Ralvek frowned. Explain. When a sniper fires, Mason continued, There's only one shot. One breath. One choice. We don't fire to disable. We don't fire to scatter. We fire to end. Ralvek stared at the humans and, for the first time in his career, found himself unable to argue. An alert pinged. The next challenge had begun. Mobile targets moving laterally through simulated cover. No drone tracking, no sensor lock. Just motion and instinct. A sniper from Kenya stepped forward, his skin dark against the chrome gleam of his scope. He knelt, adjusted his sling, and fired in perfect sync with the target's movement. The round curved past two obstacles, ricocheted once, and struck the dummy in its virtual heart. Ralvek's mouth opened, but no words came out. Further down the line, a young woman with a scar under one eye prepared her shot. She steadied her rifle, exhaled slowly, and struck a target through the gap between a swinging panel and a turning wheel. Her hand didn't even twitch. Ralvek turned toward his Thrix counterpart, who stood quietly beside him. We rely on algorithms, calculations. These people rely on discipline, the Thrix finished. And something else. Something primal. Ralvek didn't like the word. Primal meant uncontrollable, feral. But these shots weren't wild. They were patient, cold, focused, like apex predators deciding when, not whether, to kill. By noon, the final challenge was issued. A 4-kilometer shot, wind variable, with zero margin of error. Only one sniper volunteered. Mason. He returned to his spot, shoulders loose, fingers steady. Juno said nothing this time. She didn't need to. Mason adjusted, exhaled, and fired. 7.5 seconds later, the target, an armored core buried in angled cover, collapsed into the dust. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mason stood, unslung his rifle, and walked away. Ralvek followed. He caught up, walking beside the man he'd laughed at just one day ago. You weren't born for this, he said, trying to break the silence. You were forged by something. Mason didn't look at him. War for us was never clean. Our machines fail. Our orders change. But one thing never did. If you didn't make the shot, your brother died. Ralvek slowed. The weight of that truth settled into his chest. You kill without emotion, he said finally. No, Mason replied. We kill with all of it. That's why we don't miss. Ralvek stopped walking. In that moment, he understood what the Concorde had missed. Human snipers didn't aim with optics or programming. They aimed with memory, with trauma, with absolute clarity of purpose. The others hadn't come to show off their skills. They'd come to remind the galaxy that silence didn't mean weakness, and patience didn't mean fear. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Ralvek remained behind, watching dust swirl gently in the breeze, his mind spinning with a single, chilling realization. The Concorde hadn't just underestimated Earth's weapons. They had underestimated Earth's will. Months had passed since the demonstrations, but the echoes of those silent killshots still reverberated through the Galactic Concorde's halls. The initial amusement that greeted humanity's primitive tactics had long since evaporated, replaced by a sober reassessment. Earth was no longer a curiosity, it was a variable no one could afford to ignore. In the High Council chamber orbiting a shattered moon, representatives from dozens of species debated fiercely. Screens showed footage of the sniper teams neutralizing targets from impossible distances, without a trace of technological aid. The mood was tense. The question on every mind was no longer if Earth belonged among the stars, but how to reckon with it. Ralvek sat silently in the back, his once cocky demeanor replaced by a quiet respect. His thoughts kept returning to Mason, the sniper who had refused to explain his craft in terms the Concorde understood. The man's words echoed still. We kill with all of it. That's why we don't miss. Outside the chamber, the galaxy was restless. A conflict brewed on a distant frontier where AI-driven drone swarms had overwhelmed traditional forces. The Concorde, stretched thin, had reluctantly requested assistance from Earth's sharpshooters. Mason's team had been dispatched without fanfare, landing on the war-torn planet under cover of darkness. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Drones malfunctioned under electromagnetic interference, leaving the Concorde's ground troops exposed. Mason and his team moved silently through the broken ruins, their presence a whisper of death. Without sensors, without digital guidance, they relied on senses honed by years of uncertainty. One by one, Mason's snipers picked off key drone command units, crippling the swarm's coordination. The enemy faltered. Where advanced technology failed, human resolve endured. Among the alien forces was Lieutenant Kothris, a hardened soldier who had once dismissed Earth's warriors as relics. Now, he observed from the trenches, all replacing skepticism. He had watched a sniper calmly calculate an 8-second shot, adjusting for shifting winds and gravity, all without a single artificial aid. Kothris caught Mason's eye during a brief lull. "Your kind fights with more than weapons," he said quietly. "There is something deeper." Mason nodded. "We fight with purpose. Every shot carries a story." Kothris studied the man, understanding dawning. These were not mere soldiers. They were custodians of silence, wielding patience as a weapon sharper than any blade. Back on Concorde homeworlds, the political tide shifted. Earth's invitation to join the Galactic Concorde was no longer a courtesy, it was a strategic necessity. Sniper training programs were proposed, with Mason and his team as instructors, bridging worlds through the shared language of precision and endurance. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Some factions feared humanity's unpredictable nature, their willingness to embrace chaos rather than rely solely on logic. Others saw an ally forged in fire, capable of tipping the scales in wars yet to come. In the quiet moments between battles, Mason found himself alone in the desert where it all began. The sun dipped low, casting amber hues over endless sands. He adjusted the worn strap of his rifle, its weight familiar and comforting. He spoke softly into a recorder, the only witness to his thoughts. "They used to laugh. Now they listen. But this is only the beginning." The wind stirred, carrying with it the distant crack of a single, precise shot. A sound that would herald a new era, one defined not by the loud roar of advanced weaponry, but by the silent certainty of the killshot. Mason's gaze lifted toward the horizon, steady and unflinching. The galaxy was learning what it meant to face humanity, and that lesson had just begun. The war on the distant frontier had evolved beyond expectations. Mason's team, once observers, now stood at the forefront of a conflict that threatened to unravel the fragile alliances the Galactic Concorde had spent centuries building. The drone swarms were adapting, shifting tactics with alarming speed, but the human snipers, Mason chief among them, were adapting faster. Under the cover of night, Mason crouched beside a shattered wall, eyes scanning the horizon through his worn scope. Beside him, Corporal Juno Sato whispered updates, her voice calm but urgent. The targets had multiplied, their movement unpredictable, yet Mason's mind remained razor-sharp, calculating trajectories with the practiced ease of a master artist painting a final stroke. Ralvek, now assigned as liaison between the human unit and the Concorde command, stood behind them, a mix of respect and tension etched across his features. The alien's earlier skepticism had faded into a grudging admiration, but old doubts lingered beneath the surface. He watched as Mason adjusted his position, breathing steady and controlled, then fired. The bullet sang through the night air, striking a high-priority drone just as it attempted to deploy a swarm of smaller units. The explosion was silent but deadly, a perfect demonstration of human patience and precision. Ralvek exhaled slowly. "Your methods confound us," he admitted. "We rely on data, but you rely on something else." Mason's eyes didn't leave the scope. "Experience," he said simply, "and the understanding that every shot has a consequence." Hours later, the team found themselves pinned down in a ruined outpost, enemy forces closing in with relentless pressure. Communication lines flickered, and electronic warfare crippled their usual support systems. Mason gathered his snipers, his voice low and steady. "We don't have their tech. But we have each other. Cover your sectors. Make every shot count." As the enemy advanced, the team moved with silent efficiency. Each sniper became a guardian of a small perimeter, their rifles whispering death across the battlefield. Juno covered a narrow alley, her rounds finding weak points in drone armor. Another sniper, a stoic woman from the northern highlands, fired through dense foliage, her breath steady despite the chaos. Ralvek fought to keep pace, struggling to grasp the human blend of instinct and resolve. When the last enemy drone fell, silence settled like a heavy cloak. The Concord forces had survived, but barely. In the aftermath, Ralvek approached Mason once more. "Your kind fights not just with weapons, but with willpower." Mason met his gaze evenly. "When the odds are against you, will is all you have." That night, beneath alien stars, the Concord Command issued a new directive. Earth snipers were to be integrated into frontline units across multiple sectors. Their reputation had transcended novelty. They were now essential. Yet, not all welcomed the change. Within the shadows of the Concord hierarchy, whispers of distrust grew. Could humanity's fierce independence and unpredictability be controlled? Or would their raw, unyielding nature become a threat to the order the galaxy clung to? Mason sensed the growing tension but remained focused. His mission was clear, not to question politics but to protect his team and complete the objective. The galaxy was changing, and with it, the meaning of warfare. In a quiet moment, Juno approached him, her eyes reflecting the distant fires of battle. "Do you think they understand us?" Mason smiled faintly. "They're learning. But understanding takes time. Patience." As dawn broke over the alien horizon, Mason slung his rifle and prepared for the next mission. The killshots that once echoed quietly across deserts were now a symphony in the stars. And the galaxy would never forget their sound.